Hello everybody and welcome back to the Painted Lady Coaching YouTube channel. How are we doing today? I am your healing bestie and I am here to help you alchemize your pain, reclaim your identity, and help you have healthy, thriving relationships. So today's video is going to be about having healthy boundaries and what that looks like, what it is, how to do that, all of that fun stuff. The whole theme that I kind of have going on for this month has to do with like toxic abuse cycles and narcissistic abuse. So we're going to be speaking about boundaries within the context of that. But, boundaries are necessary for everybody. So I'm going to be definitely stressing the importance of them, but especially through the context of those who maybe have complex trauma and have had the type of toxic relational dynamics, either like through childhood or maybe just in romantic relationships, to where this would apply especially. And why that's important, because I feel like that is very much the case as to why a lot of people that get into toxic relationship dynamics or narcissistic abusive dynamics is because of a lack of boundaries. I know that was definitely the case for me, because I did not have a good understanding of what healthy boundaries were and what they look like, and how to have those for myself. So that's kind of that was a way that I was prepped and primed to be in a relationship like that. And it's too common of a story. But anyway, well, let's get to it. So let's even just kind of break it down to its most basic thing, like what is a boundary? Because I even think a lot of people just don't even understand that, like what a boundary is. So I will say first and foremost that a boundary is not a rule or a demand, because oftentimes I think we kind of conflate a boundary as such. But the thing about rules and demands is that they're often very disempowering, especially to the person that is trying to establish an actual boundary. But which, I mean, and they often just don't work, because really when we are like demanding like a rule or or a request, it's still up to the person basically as to whether they decide to follow it or not, and they can enforce it, or they can't enforce it is what it is. Sorry. But boundaries, on the other hand, they are about us and what we will do as a consequence if a violation occurs. So boundaries are very empowering. They help protect everybody involved and protect our energy, and invites people to love us and to love us properly. And a good example would be like, say, like a rule or a demand that's like, do not speak to me that way, right? But the thing is like, a person can choose to follow that or not. But a boundary says, if you continue to speak to me that way, I will get up from the table, or I will end this conversation, or whatever. So it does put the power back in your hands, and it keeps everybody safe, and it's very clear, and it's very defined, and consequences are laid out. And it's about what you will do and not the other person. Right? All right. And there's also different types of boundaries, so we can kind of like go into that, right? So there's like emotional boundaries, and that has to kind of do with like the conditions and the preferences in which a person person chooses to share their their emotional life, or how their emotional needs are handled. Intellectual, which is preferences on like thoughts, opinions, and like conversations are handled. Physical, which I think a lot of people understand for the most part, which is preferences on you experience like touch and closeness and privacy with your physical body and being. And this is maybe even where maybe sexual boundaries might come into place, and like consent and things like that. But sexual matters maybe also include not just like the physical aspect, but maybe even also like maybe how matters around of the sexual nature are like discussed or handled or presented, and all of that fun stuff. And then there's also like material boundaries, like your personal items. And then there's also time boundaries, which all of these boundaries basically help protect us, like I said, in our energy and our overall well-being and our mental health and emotional health. So with that said, getting into the concept of like how narcissistic abuse impacts this part of our life, right? So with narcissistic abuse, they slowly erode at like your boundaries, like in a myriad of ways, which a lot of the time is done through like constant criticism, gaslighting, and like emotional manipulation. And will often just kind of like make demands and kind of do things in complete regard to like your needs, or kind of claim that things are done for their needs without regarding yours, if that makes sense. So because of all of the different ways that they tend to like just erode and like tear you down, like in general, is why it's very difficult to even just establish boundaries with them at all. And how they kind of just break yours down over time. It's quite a sticky situation. So because all of the ways they technically just break you down and like erode at your sense of self and boundaries and just kind of amputate you slowly but surely over time, it makes it difficult to really like assert yourself, and you just kind of end up being just confused in every which way. So, and then coming out on the other side of that, right? So you will likely have a lot of complex PTSD symptoms. So then this comes up as like, being hypervigilant, maybe being afraid of conflict, just generally having a hard time trusting others and yourself and the world around you. So that's going to further complicate like boundary setting, because you may like even just like try to overcompensate for the fact that you really couldn't assert yourself like at all. And then maybe also then like going back and maybe just kind of like just not knowing where to land with that and having a hard time striking a balance. And it just gets very, very tumultuous. So when you actually start the boundary work, a good place to start is really just connecting with yourself and what you need, and like going through like different self-awareness techniques to really just like look within, reflect, and understand like what all that is. A good way to do that is a lot of journaling, meditating, and if you don't, I would say it's a great time to start. And it can take some practice to really get good at it, and even looking up different meditations on YouTube can be very helpful. I also like to listen to frequencies, like healing frequencies. There's playlists all over Spotify for it. And that can really help just get you into the headspace if you struggle to do that. I know my favorite thing to do when I was in this era of my life, I did a lot of meditating by the beach. I live in Florida, so it was something that I could very feasibly do. And even if you don't live like by a beach, just getting out in nature is definitely going to be a very healing experience for you, while also just connecting with your intuition, connecting with yourself, connecting with source energy. It's really going to help this process that much more. And then of course, as always, speaking to a mental health professional, a therapist, or a coach, just to help you along this process, and even other like education materials such as books, getting into communities, groups, and like just content that's centered around your healing, right? But I also will have attached to this video in the description, I have my own journaling prompts for you for free, that they are basically designed to help reflect on your feelings and your values and your needs, and reclaiming your identity and healing and moving forward. And they're kind of listed by section, and they're all 100 different prompts, so it's a good place to help you get started just on that reflection. And I hope you find it very helpful. And then not only that, I also do have like a values card sort, and it does have some instructions in there, but it's got a whopping 230 different types of personal values. And basically what you do is you sort all of the values by category, and you then use that to kind of help you determine your top 5 to 10 personal values. And then I'll get into what that is a little bit more here in just a second. So card sort, yeah, you cut them all up, and then you organize them by, different categories of like not important, important, and very important. And you basically want to like sit with yourself and kind of like reflect on them, and just kind of narrow it down to your top 5 to 10 values. And these values are basically going to be like your North Star with any like relationship that you find yourself in. And these kind of help basically stick to your authenticity and to your boundaries, right? Because if we are like sticking to our values with the people and the situations that we choose to align ourselves with, then we will have a much more seamless time navigating all of our relationships, for sure. But it's a perfect little tool to kind of like just, keep that at the forefront and assess. And we can check in with ourselves periodically, like throughout life, and just to see how like maybe we've adapted or changed or, whatever. and just use that as a barometer and seeing if that's all still resonates, right? It's a beautiful little tool. I definitely utilized this method when I was really trying to redefine what I was looking for, or really just understand what I was looking for from like a relationship, and what I wanted out of a partner even. And trust me, it did me very well, because I have the partner that I have and he fit those values. I would argue that like getting very clear on your values will honestly help you manifest whatever it is you're looking for that much quicker. Because if you are very clear with yourself and you're clear on what you value and what you're looking for, you will find it. The universe likes when you're very clear. I've come to find that. So another tool for you is like identifying your triggers as well, and processing your triggers and emotions behind them, because this also lets you know where there's work to be done, right? So when we identify where there are triggers present within our life, we are understanding where work needs to be done and where needs need to be met. And with understanding that, we can be clear with ourselves and maybe the people that we have in our life, which again helps to keep boundaries clear. So now that we have an understanding of all of this, we can literally spell out and define maybe what our needs are, and like just kind of pull it all out on a sheet of paper, in a journal, whatever. And the best way you can do that is just to kind of put it out and put it into I statements, like I need this, I require this. And it's important to be very specific and detailed when putting all of this out. Now, when it comes to maybe communicating this to the people in your life, when it comes up in conversation, it's important to be very direct, but to be respectful. Because being assertive does not necessarily mean being aggressive, okay? So I feel like a lot of people tend to confuse that. But then again, it's also very understandable that it's like, you know, if we do feel violated in a certain way, per se, it can be very easy, I think, to be on the defense like that. But it's very important to come from a calm and very regulated place when communicating these needs. And it's a lot more likely to go over, you know, a lot smoother. Not always, I will say, because sometimes you can even still be coming from a very respectful place. But if people are not a fan of you putting boundaries, then they may not respond to that very well. But that also tells you a lot of information, I think, about that person. So yeah, with that said, definitely consider all of the possibilities that somebody may respond to you. Because I know I've definitely had to put my foot down about like my relationship with certain family members, and I've had other family members try to push me to continue to speak to certain people that I have said that I won't speak to because of certain abuse that has gone on. And I've had to say like, hey, with all due respect, like I understand that you just want everybody to get along, but like I have said already that like this is someone that I choose to not have contact with, and if you keep pushing me and keep getting involved in my relationship with this other person that I choose to not have, then I may have to reconsider my relationship with you. And I was very calm and collected and very just direct when I explained everything, and it still didn't really go over well. And a lot of the times, like, it won't. If maybe the person is just not ready to hear something like that and isn't really cool with boundaries in general. Which, again, like I said, I come from a family where, like, healthy boundaries is not exactly a thing. So it can be difficult depending on who you're talking to. But if you are in that situation, you still have to reaffirm your boundaries, stand on what you say, and be consistent. And that's going to be a big key. And even follow through, even if it may be difficult. Because I know, like, when you're first getting, you know, comfortable with setting boundaries, like, it feels like absolute hell. It feels like you are doing a bad thing and you're a bad person, and it can even kind of eat you up at first, like, for sure, if you're just not comfortable standing up for yourself. But it is so important. But if you are able to set boundaries with people and they respect it, then I promise those are your people. Because people that respect your boundaries those are the green flag people. Those are the people you want to keep around, for sure. Okay. So with boundaries, you may have to reinforce over time. And I mean, especially when you're dealing with manipulative, like, individuals. And of course that can be very difficult. And then again, and it's important to, like, keep to your word if this is a person who keeps testing your boundaries. And it's difficult, I know. And like I said, like, it is going to be super, super, super uncomfortable, like, probably when you are first dealing with certain types of people, whether it be family members or people that you may be dating. But I mean, especially with people that you are dating, it's like, I would just so keep that into consideration. Like, if they push back, like, that's not someone you want to continue with. I promise you. But again, you will have to keep pushing through that guilt and that fear, especially if you are just used to, like, those people-pleasing tendencies and not standing up for yourself. And I promise it will get easier over time. It will get easier over time. Especially when you remind yourself that this is about your well-being and your safety. And really theirs too. And I promise it gets easier over time, and that guilt and that fear and that voice will get quieter and quieter and quieter. I promise. All right, and then, like I said, your support systems will also be such a help to you in this time, because you will probably need that voice of reason, that sounding board, like when you talk about, like, oh my god, like, I did it, but I felt like I was gonna die, and they will be there to reassure you and reaffirm you and back you up, whether that's your friend, a therapist, or somebody you trust, or your coach, just whoever. And I promise they will back you up and probably even congratulate you and be proud of you that you did what you did, even if you felt like you were gonna throw up. And honestly, in this process, mistakes can happen. Mistakes can very much happen, especially when you're still getting comfortable with establishing boundaries and breaking through people-pleasing tendencies. You may fall short at times. I would expect that. Because we're not perfect beings. and we're still learning this dance, right? It is a learning process, and that is okay. But that's the thing. Once we understand the mistake that we make, it is of utmost importance that we don't repeat it once we understand it. If that makes sense. But again, compassion is key when learning and adjusting with anything. And especially when, like, after a prolonged period of time of just having your sense of self, like, chipped away at to where you don't know where your sense of self begins and the other person and yada yada. Like, the importance here, though, is having compassion for yourself and grace when learning how to do something that you've never really have been taught to do, haven't really seen positive examples for yourself, and you've just had, family members or people in relationships like erode at your sense of self and trust and take advantage of those lack of boundaries. Okay? That's a big one. And boundary setting is definitely like a lifelong practice, and it's going to evolve and change as our relationships evolve and change. And like I said, that's all okay, and we must keep like self-compassion like at the forefront of it all. And definitely celebrate your progress, for sure. It's like when you start to get more comfortable and things start to become more intrinsic and you stand up for yourself, no questions asked, like, acknowledge that, for sure. Because it's a beautiful thing. It's such a beautiful thing. And very freeing at that. At the end of the day, like, we all deserve that kind of respect, and we owe it to ourselves to respect ourselves and protect ourselves. And if you're anything like me, like, you didn't learn how to do that for yourself, and you didn't learn how to protect yourself because the people that needed to protect you didn't in certain instances. So congratulate yourself for taking it upon yourself and taking accountability on learning that for yourself. You have the right to protect your mental and emotional well-being and just your energy overall, because it's precious. But I also want to hear from you. What have you learned about boundaries within your relationships, whether it be like family dynamics or like relationship dynamics, and how do you think you can improve your relationship dynamics? Let me know in the comments. But thank you so much for listening and participating, and I thank you guys so very much for being here. And I love you all. I hope you have a wonderful day. Bye-bye.